I got a lot of money and a lot of time invested in this first setup, and it worked okay, just getting it back and forth from the trailer to the cruise in or the car show or whatever I was doing. But I want to be able to put it in parades, and I'd like for it to be able to pull a trailer. So I've got to come up with something better, something stronger. So I'm going to see what I can do with the parts that I have now. But now I've got some golf cart axles, and I'm going to try to put them underneath the semi. And you can see that basically I've started doing some tear down. So I've been doing a whole lot of work on the back end of the semi that I hadn't filmed, but I got the back axle on here. I had to cut out a bunch of the steel that was back here, and then I had the piece on here that was basically like that. It was on here I had to cut off, so I'm going to end up having to cut that piece off. Probably cut this middle piece out right here. And also, this axle is 5 inches narrower than this axle. And I'm going to end up having to flip it around. So I'll have to change sides with the brakes and all that kind of stuff too. But I'll either make it up with wheel spacers out here on the outside, 2.5 inch wheel spacers on each side, or I may change the offset in my wheel to make them be the same width. But that's what I've been doing, a lot of cutting, and I got a lot more cutting to go. I'm not going to go with the suspension. I did actually figure out a way of doing suspension on the back of it, which I may come back and do at a later time, but right now I'm just going to do it solid suspension in the back. I have the suspension in the front now, which will help a whole lot. But as y'all can see, I've cut away a lot of steel. I cut the cross piece out that went back here. I cut the cross piece out that went across here. And that was some pretty heavy angle iron. I added this brace right here just to kind of keep it stiffened up. Well, I'm making these wheel adapters. Basically, this should fit the 4-bolt of the golf cart, and then this will bolt into the holes on this wheel, because this is actually a 4-wheeler wheel. These are 12 by 8, so they're pretty wide. 25 by 10 by 12 tires on them. I had 23s on there. These are a little bit taller, so I'm going to have to basically do a little bit of modifications. But these are a lot fatter wheels and tires than what I had on there. This is actually some I had in my wheel and tire hoard. And it's actually a matching set, believe it or not. So, gotta get that front axle mounted on there. Get it clamped down. Like I said, I will have to do a wheel spacer on the front to bring them out the same width. Then I'll have to start figuring out how I'm going to get all this tied together. And I gotta get my, I'm going to move the transaxle underneath here to power it. So, let me get a little further. Alright, so on these motors, I took them apart, and this shaft went up through the middle of here. So I had to take my press and press this coil part off of this shaft. And these things were all inside the housing down in there that the wiring was wrapped around to make the electric magnets for the motor. So I basically gutted these motors, and I took these shafts out. Well, they were 1 1/10 inches, and I needed them 1 inch for my sprockets to go on here, and I needed a 1/4 inch keyway cut in there. So a very nice man that I was working with turned these down to 1 inch for me and cut the keyway in there, and I'm going to use the housing for the shaft to go in here and use the bearing mount. See, this will actually press back in there and be the bearing mount, but I'm actually going to put a sprocket on these going into the housing. So I'm drilling a big hole in the side of the housing for the chain to go in and out of to the sprocket. But when I get a little further along on it, you'll see what I'm doing, and I'll show you how it's all going to work. Well, so begins the tear down of the poor boy Polaris. I got a bunch of ideas that I want to try on this. I hope they work out, because once I start tearing this thing apart, there's going to be no turning back. But I'm going to use the transaxle out of poor boy Polaris and put it in the semi right along in here somewhere, because I need a transaxle with the locker in it like I have in this one, because I'm only going to be pulling on one side. So I need it to be solid. So I guess I get to start tearing this thing down, seeing what I can do with it. I was trying to figure out a way to not have to lay under the semi and bolt up a bunch of stuff, or weld a bunch of stuff, mainly weld. And I've made these pieces. I made the front one lower than the back one, that way this shifter linkage will clear. I'm probably going to have to cut this post down anyway, and the belt is probably going to end up straddling this piece right here, because it's going to be over to the left sides. The belt will be coming out at an angle this way, but I still got to make some pieces coming up off of this to the same level as this. That way I can just set it up there and probably just bolt it. I'll clamp it and bolt it to the frame. That way I can take this whole thing down. This whole thing is 1 unit down. And I'm probably going to end up, since my sprocket, I'm going to have a sprocket on this side, I'm probably going to end up putting a piece across here and mounting a pillow block bearing or something right here to just help with some of that force that's going to be on this one side. So this is what my setup looks like. Got the shaft with the sprocket in there. Got the shaft with 2 sprockets in here. Naturally my holes aren't lining up exactly, so I'm probably going to have to do a little trimming for the chains to come out, but then I'm going to have a sprocket on here. I'm going to try to put a big sprocket on there. That way I'll be big sprocket down to little sprocket, because I need to speed it back up a little bit, because this has a lot of reduction in it, so I have to bring it back up here somewhere.